Welcome all. Thank you for coming to this conversation. It's a pleasure to speak with you again. We spoke a couple of years ago on Open Studio, so we'll continue the conversation. I understand everybody is immersed in your work and process, so we'll just dive right in. One of the questions that I have immediately is when you see a piece of farm equipment, what's the synapse that happens? What stops you?
I usually want to eat corn. I like machines. The first machine I painted was in 1937. My father got a 37 Ford, and I did a watercolor of it. My mother threw it away since then, but there were critics all over. But I like machines. That's one of the things I like.
But what happened for the machines that we see in this show? Why those particular machines? What happens? Because I understand that you do a lot of driving. There's a lot of exploration that you suddenly stop, and it's that one.
There's a complicated procedure that has developed over the years. But the thing is, the subject matter. You talk about the subject matter. The subject is always available to me because I'm an artist. I paint the world. I really paint the world. That was something, when I left Yale, I had it in my mind that since I studied with Dickinson, and now I'm trying to find myself, I wanted to paint a lot. I like to paint the world. I'd like to paint things, and I like to paint some things. Then I found out afterwards I like to paint everything. Anything I saw, I'm like a doctor on call. I'm looking, in fact, if you would all sit here for a month, I could do a nice painting. I always start out with that optimism anyway. But I'm always looking, and I never know what I'm going to find because it's too complicated a procedure to have it. I used to make sketches. I remember I used to make drawings. And I had a whole sketchbook filled with drawings of things I'm going to paint. So I was in between paintings, which is terrible at home because I'm a little bit nervous when I'm in between paintings. Nothing to do, nothing to paint, you know. So I found something that looked like a good idea that I'd looked at like a month before, a wonderful idea. And I drove there and I looked at it and said, why did I put that down for? It looks awful. And it was true. I have to strike while it's hot. If I like it, it's a painting. But if I don't, it's nothing. I can't do it.
And does that mean you just stop there, you break out the easel there, you start there?
Well, it's more civilized than that these days. It's a procedure that I do a lot of research, and instead of making a lot of trips now, I carry an iPad with me, and I get a lot of angles, and then I go home. I've got the idea of what I want, but I don't know how I'm going to do it. So then I start to figure out how I'm going to do it with all these different pictures. Then I know the size, what angle it's going to be, all that kind of stuff when I'm doing landscapes.
You just mentioned your former teacher, Dickinson, who once described, I was combing through all of the catalogs today, who once described painting as like jumping off a train at 60 miles per hour. Explain what that means.
Well, at the time he said that, I thought he lost it, you know. There's a lot of things he told me at the time I thought he's losing it. But what it means is there's a lack of security in confidence about you succeeding at anything, let alone a painting. So it means that, and then it means that once you get going, the machine is not on a track, it's going somewhere else, and you have to follow it rather than lead it. So it has those kind of thoughts around it. And that's what really goes on all the time.
How challenging would you say it is every time you sit down to create a picture?
Well, I think it's very challenging, but it's my bread and butter. I mean, I thrive on it. I thrive on the insecurity, the ignorance, the lack of confidence. All of that feeds me desperately to try to make something. So I put much more into it. I think I always felt that way when I grew up. When I was young, I didn't think about it. But as I began to think of the pitfalls, the lack of direction, what the styles are in the world, what's appropriate, what the world wants, all that sort of stuff goes on through you when you're young. I've lost all interest in that kind of information these days.
Did you ever, were there periods though, through all these decades of painting where you didn't feel it was as challenging, where you got more confidence? Did you always hold on to those nerves?
It happens sometimes when we're working on a lousy painting. I think it's wonderful. You know? And then I wake up about the next day and find out it isn't. You know. What was the question?
Basically, if you've ever got a lot of confidence.
No, teaching and talking to you, I do have a lot of confidence, you know, and these friendly people here. But painting, I don't have any confidence at all. I don't have time to think about things like that. That's like a downer, you know. I'm thinking about, I have something to think about in how to make this thing, what I have in mind, and what's going on and where the painting's going these last few months, and can I keep guiding it along that track, or things like that.
I always love to ask this question of artists because I get so many different answers, but how do you know when a painting is done?
Well, I really never finished a painting. I mean, I abandon them, I give them up, or I falsely think it's finished.
Even, is that the case as you look around the room right now?
Everyone. I can go back and fix that part. I never have lacked the idea that there's something to do yet. You know, that's why I really feel they have to be done at certain times. Like when I'm doing a one-sitting painting, it has to be done in 2 hours. So I do it in a half an hour or something like that to get it over with. And they usually, a lot of them come out. I can't do fast paintings much anymore. I can do things that take a lot of time.
I'm very intrigued about the allure of the brownstone for you. And I was, you know, the strangest thing was today I was at a board meeting at WCVB, where you must remember that you have this very large piece in their conference room there, and it dates to the 1980s, and it's this massive piece, probably about the size of this wall, actually.
It's 50 by 80.
Yep. Of the brownstones. And it occurred to me in the middle of this meeting, when clearly I wasn't paying attention, that it was your painting, which I thought was very interesting given that we were doing this talk tonight. But you return to them over and over again, always making new discoveries. What draws you to them?
When I was Yale and in my prime, this fellow with a friend of mine then, I was talking to him, I was saying, New Haven's wonderful. I love New England. And he was insulted. He came from Boston. And he said, this is not New England. And he said, New England. And so that weekend he took me on a tour of Boston, of the Cape, the North Shore, and so forth. And I decided then, this was 1961, I was going to live in Boston. So it took me 8 years of teaching in different places to get a job here. So I've been living here ever since. But I don't know, because when I went to London, I said, gee, these are the buildings that I really like rather than Boston. So if I knew that, maybe I would have gone to London to live. But my father was a carpenter, and I like architecture. But I like cars, and I like water, and I like different. But that was one of the things I liked, was architecture. So I saw all these buildings, and I spent about 40 years double parked before they start giving me tickets for being double parked. And so I can only come down here now when it's summertime and I can paint on the street. It's 6 o'clock in the morning when only people are drunk or going to work.
But you never tire of them. I mean, what drives you? Or do you know what drives you to find something new every time?
To find something new, oh, that's a challenge because I have to work harder and harder with these buildings. Of course, they changed the windows, so that's a lot of help. But the stores disappear, you know, in a couple of years the stores disappear. Other stores, they change the facades, they do that. But I like the regular, where they live too. You know, I've been going up and down and doing this as a mainstay. That's what I like. I always have a couple up of the stores here too. I remember working on one and I had worked out the window and it had some abstraction and some words on it. And I didn't really like it, but I was painting it. And 2 weeks later, they took that away and they put in a lady with some sort of jail around her. And I started painting that. I said, well, this is a little bit more interesting. I was still working on it when they took that down and they put up triangular columns of mirrors with some suitcases or other. And I said, there is a God. Look how beautiful that looks. So I put that in the painting. But I put things I don't like, and I try to make a good painting out of it. But if I like it, that's an extra plus.
Okay. You do a lot of negotiating, I gathered in reading today, about making sure that a vehicle is in a certain place, or something that you discover not necessarily within the city, but how much negotiating is there when you're finding subjects?
I try not to deal with people. They're not reliable. Other than that, I do a lot of talking when I need help, but I don't. I failed a lot of times. I want to do some things, and then some people are very cooperative, and then wanted me to pay her rent because I was painting her house, or a fee. Different kinds of people. That's why I don't like to deal with people.
I want to go back to, and we'll bounce around a bit here, but your teaching, how has that influenced your career? You spent so much time communicating, immersed with your students, immersed in your students' work, talking about art, reviewing, critiquing. That has got to settle into you when you go back to your own canvas on your own time.
Well, I had some experiences that weren't so nice. I vowed I would never teach after I taught for 50 years after that, you know. But I had some teachers I didn't like very much, and I don't think they were very helpful. And when I was roughing it in New York, a friend of mine told me I should go to Yale and so I could get a teaching degree so at least I could have a decent life. So I did that, and I had a decent life. He was right. We had summers all off, and I could do that. But I had something to teach, I think, the simple fundamentals of art as I know it, that has something to do with color, with drawing, with organization, with trying to reconstruct forms in a flat surface, all those issues. I could teach that. That was what I did. So I never thought it took anything out of me. I rather liked it. I mean, the students are always very innocent, and if they stay in my class, they trust me. And I treated everybody like they were Michelangelo. I found out from experience that I couldn't project how they were going to succeed or how successful they are now. All I could do is try to help them now. I remember one boy, I really couldn't understand him at all. He was there before I was, and he was painting all day, and everybody else looked at him, didn't have any idea about his qualities at all. And after about a year and a half, he turned out to be the best painter in the school, and nobody still could help him. So I think I was better at teaching than at judging people.
And what about the converse? Were there takeaways? Were there revelations that you had through students' work that affected how you worked?
Well, I felt envious sometimes. They were doing something so easily and it turned out wonderful, you know. I felt that, but I felt a lot of times that I was just trying to help them.
You just mentioned color, and I was reading today how you followed Albers. You weren't able to study under him, but you were able to teach color as he did. Yeah. I've been paying a lot of attention to him recently between the Black Mountain College show, and he has a few pieces in the Corita Kent show at the Harvard Art Museums. Mm-hmm. He also inspired her. Tell me about his theory on color and how you were able to translate that.
Well, I was lucky. I came in a year after he retired. And I got the people who knew everything about it. I taught it as a class. Some of my first classes at the Maryland Institute of Art. I taught a color class. I taught it exactly as I was taught it, with the book and with the free studies and with the problems, etc. I did exactly the same thing. I think that it was a procedure that was known by everybody in all time. And I think it was clarified since the war in modern times. It was clarified as an issue. But I think the idea that color affects color on a limited surface was known by all the masters, you know. And I think that he milked an idea well, and it helped a lot of people. I didn't have any need for it, although I went to the movies for 2 months not doing any homework when I first had that class. And then one night I started pushing it around so I would make something I liked. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, I finished it. And I said, well, I pushed it around at least. So when I went up there, we had a class that had all blackboards around there. And on this level, they had it for erasers, and we would put our work up there. And when the teacher came in, he walked right, they gave a crit at the beginning. He walked straight to my painting, my collage, and started talking about it for a half an hour. And then he said, who did this? And everybody turned around, and I put my hand up, and everybody said, Nick! And so that's when I found out that I could take any problem, as long as I could ingest it and use it for my own ends in a serious way, I could benefit from it.
Flash forward, I understand that there's a new technique that you've been developing, that you've been using and employing in the last couple of years, about scraping paint away. How did you arrive there?
Well, that's through desperation. I'm serious. I mean, I scrape the painting off a lot. I do a lot of different things to a painting because I want to correct something, and when the paint gets like that, it's hard to correct it. So you have to scrape it, rub it down, or put a lot more paint on it. I got tired about putting in too much paint after a while. That's one of the reasons. So I took my knife, excuse me, that wasn't purposeful. I took my knife and I had put on paint like this and like this here. And as soon as I smoothed it down, it made a shape. Beside the shape, it made a solid tone, a solid color. And I thought, what a present. Somehow, in looking at the paint before that, I couldn't really see the exact fineness and accuracy of that tone color. So that cleared up that. So through this painting, I kept on doing that, and I found out that it helped me put less painting on, but it ended up as being another tool in the whole process. But it gave me some definition of what I've been seeking and looking for.
And how long did it take before that happened?
70 years? I don't know. Who's counting?
Speaking of well, you're correcting the number of shows you've had.
Well, I feel we might be, since it's in print, I don't want to be sued.
Okay. Speaking of masters in technique, when I was walking around here a couple of days ago, I was reminded, as I was looking at your paint, how a curator for the Rembrandt show at the MFA, actually probably many years ago now, I think it was called Rembrandt's Journey, I don't remember how many years ago, talked about how Rembrandt sculpted in paint, which is how I looked at a lot of your pieces. I mentioned this to the gallery, and they talked to me about your connection to Rembrandt going even into your dreams. You've dreamt about him.
Twice.
In a very profound way.
I don't know. I'll tell you what they were if you want to hear them. No. All the no's leave. I had a dream. My father was a carpenter, and he wore an apron. And I wear an apron now because I'm trying to keep the paint rags that I'm wearing clean, which doesn't work. But I wear an apron anyway. It holds my palette, knife, and a sharp knife in case somebody goes for me or something. But I use it for scraping and stuff like that. So I was walking along, and there was a garage, and the door was, one-car garage, and the door was open, and Rembrandt was there. And he said, "Hi, George." I said, "Hi, Rembrandt." And he said, "Come on in." So I went in there, and I started talking to him, and this and that, and this and that. And then I said to him, "Oh, Rembrandt, could you tell me what art is?" And he says, "Well, you know," and I woke up. No help at all. But I used that dream for a long time in thinking about other things that maybe was said differently, like, "Well, you know," or something like that. Different change of tone means a lot. So about 10 or 12 years later, when I had wisened up and got more mature and knew everything, I had a dream about Rembrandt. The same garage, same apron, but on the floor were all these landscapes that he did in the 50s. He did a lot of small landscapes. And I said, "Gee, I like them." He says, "Would you like one?" I said, "Sure." So he gave it to me, and we said all our cordial things. Then I started walking to the door, and I looked at it, and I said, "But Rembrandt, you didn't sign it." He says, "What difference does that make? You wouldn't sell it, would you?" And I'm lying through my teeth in the dream, and I say, "No." So that put me down in his eyes for good. Those were the two dreams.
But has there been a connection? Have you always been drawn to him? Do you conjure him in some fashion, as I seem to have when I was looking at your work?
Did you?
I did.
Something's wrong with you. I like Rembrandt. I remember when I was in Rochester, New York, they were throwing books away, and they threw away who's the publisher? Famous.
Abrams.
What?
Abrams.
No, before that.
Faden.
What?
Faden.
Fiden. Excuse me. Yeah. They had a book in black and white with all of his paintings, and I had it for years. And I always look at them. And the only real paintings I saw when I was young was at the George Eastman House. They had a Rembrandt portrait, a Tintoretto portrait, and an English artist portrait. I can't remember his name. It's always blocked out. I don't know why. But those were the only paintings I ever saw before I grew up, till I got in the Army and I saw the National Gallery. So I've known him for a long time. I mean, the works. But I knew them in black and white, and then I began to see them in the flesh, and I always admired him, and I always really loved a lot of his work. And it's been going on for a long time, and then this summer, a friend of mine told me that there was a show of late Rembrandt at the National Gallery in London, and it had just switched over to Amsterdam, so I told my wife, I said, I think I have to go to see the last Rembrandts all together in Amsterdam. So I'll go for the day and come back. She said, "No, you won't. We'll go for the week, and then I'll go with you." So we did that, and I really had a big revelation there for seeing those works that I knew some of them, but to see them all together, and it made a big contact with the logic of how he developed that and so forth.
In thinking about how you saw those paintings when you were so young, and then you didn't dive right into art. You tried music, from what I understand, and
well, no, these were formal issues. Trying music, trying to be a atomic physicist at that time that was popular. different things like that. But I was painting all my life. I was painting before I can remember. I was drawing, and when I was 12 years old, I used my money to buy my first oil painting set, and nobody painted in the house. And I do nothing about painting, but I bought an oil set, and I started painting. I didn't have any training until after I got out of the Army, and I was 21. I'd been painting all my life at that time. The house was filled with paintings.
And how did you, this is interesting, I just, not to name drop, but I guess I will, I just moderated this conversation with Philip Glass the other night at the MFA, and like you, he was also a cab driver for a while, doing other jobs to fuel his music making, just as you were doing to fuel the painting. What gave you the conviction that you knew that this was going to be the course of your life?
I was in Korea at the time, before the wars. There was the occupation of World War II, and the Japanese left, and there was a vacuum there. The Americans went in there. There was a southern Korea. And I wrote my father then, because I've been painting all my life, and I had failed at science, and I had failed at music, though I love music dearly. And I still go to the library and read popular science and things like that. That's about my extent. Yeah. But I really was doing all sorts of stuff without thinking. I didn't plan anything, except at that time I felt I had to have a profession. So I was allowed, I had a friend in the Corps that took care of books and sports equipment. They also had some paints, and they gave me some paints, and I painted there all the time at night. There was no war going on. We were just occupying. We had chores in the engineers. So I figured out at that point that I can do this. Maybe I should make a career out of it. That's when I wrote my father, and he said, "Congratulations, I'm glad that you picked out what you want to do," and that was it.
Was art in your family?
No. I think a grandfather played the flute or something. No art.
That's how fantastic that your father would support you so quickly, so immediately.
I had a good relationship with my father. He trusted me and I trusted him. And I still think he was a great man without any education. People used to come to him for advice, like a small town, the elder would help people out. He did that all the time, and they always came. I never thought much about it, we had a relationship such as that when I made a definite statement like that, he believed me, and he wanted to help me. That's what it was.
And as you got going, there are great narratives that define generations, and as you immerse yourself in your style and knew what you wanted to paint, others were doing or just so involved in the abstract expressionist movement, and was it such a conscious decision on your part that you weren't going to go there?
Yes. It was a conscious decision. I had painted until I left the Cleveland Institute of Art, where I found out they weren't helping me. And a friend of mine, who to this day I can't believe it, told me I had to come to New York. I was in my third year at the Cleveland Institute of Art. You have to come to New York, and you have to study with Edwin Dickinson. I didn't even know who Cezanne was at that point. So I knew who Rembrandt was and some of the others, but I said, okay. So 2 days later, I packed up and I left. I went there, and I signed up for a night course that he was teaching at the time. I couldn't get in anything else. He was teaching a night course at the Brooklyn Museum. And I began studying with him. And then after about the half year of that, I decided to study with him full-time at the Art Students League. And that's when the real indentation was made in my brain, in my capability, in my skills, in my dreams about art. Somehow they all began to feed and get into focus through him as a help. He was a wonderful person, a wonderful teacher, and a wonderful artist. And I don't think he ever pushed any point, contrary to me. You know, I do that all the time. But he would allow for people to do any kind of work, but he knew how to help them out. And was very serious about how he could help people.
When you're painting still, how often do you conjure things that he talked to you about? Or, I mean, is he very much with you?
No, I've grown out of the immediate dependency of him to the idea that I think of him when I want to think of him.
So before I turn it over to the audience Q&A, I went back and I was looking at the interview that we did a couple of years ago today, and you said something on the show that I never followed up on because it was actually part of a different answer, but I was so intrigued by it. You told me on the show that it's the natural function of an artist to find something of himself. Elaborate for me what that means.
God, I don't know. Sounds good.
I thought it was very profound.
Well, I believe in that. I think that the only, this is a very, it's in a way, it's a very soulful activity that you have no real contact with the world, and it is something generated from your interest, and that your interest is the supreme guide and what else? It's the guide for what goes on. All the kind of problems that you have, all the kind of issues that you follow, ultimately go through the sieve of your character and your desires, so that what you're doing is quiet activity, and it's all alone. It really doesn't have much to do with the world or with other people. It's very strange to have them up and have people say, "Oh, I like that," and I'm thinking, well, of course you like that part probably, but the whole thing, you know, something like that. But I think it's so personal that I think that's how it ends up being. It's such a personal activity that if you go beyond that, you lose yourself, and I think you sell yourself to other people's ideas. And I think to be sincere with and honest is a very hard thing to do, but I find out that that's the only thing. Listen, I wrote down something that suits this occasion. It was Pablo Casals at the age of 93. He was being interviewed by the comedian George Carlin. Any of you remember him? I can't believe this one. Interviewed Casals and discussed the restless nature of the artist's persona. When Casals was asked why he continued to practice cello 3 hours a day, Casals replied, "I'm beginning to notice some improvement." And that's the thing in me. I know now I notice myself getting better at this.
Well, George, Nick, it is a pleasure for me to be able to speak with you again. Now we get to turn it over. So now we have some time for some audience questions. So I don't believe we have a microphone, so I'll just call on you and we'll repeat the question back if you can't hear it. Are there any questions? They're going to make me work harder.
What's your biggest, or what is the biggest surprise for you having observed the world of painting and art making for as long as you have?
Did you all hear the question?
What's the biggest surprise in me for observing the world of art?
Yeah, any big surprises?
No, I like it. I mean, a lot of it. But some I don't like, but what's that? It's just that. I think some of I get very excited by seeing some things sometimes and that I hadn't seen before. There's one painting that I saw at the National Gallery, a Rembrandt painting about this big of the family, the baby Christ, Mary, and John. And they were all around a fire, and there were some people, workers there, and some animals, and some tent. And it was about this big. And I looked at that, and I marveled at that. It was 1946. I marveled at that painting, and I went away, and I left, wasn't able to get back to New York for a couple of years, and I went back to look at this painting again. And I found out it wasn't anything like I remembered it. It looked different, it looked better. And now that's been going on since 1946. It still happens. I find something in that painting I never saw before, and it looked different to me. It looked better. I said, maybe that's what I should be doing. Maybe that's the secret, you know, about art. But that, did I answer the question? Yeah. Very good.
Recently, I've seen different famous artists shows, you know, Sargent, you know, he has some great watercolors, you know, he's known for his oils.
Right. That's here in Boston, right?
In Boston, and other places, Gerard has some beautiful sketches that you never got to see, you know. Do you have any body of work that would surprise people that you actually did, like a whole series of sketches or watercolors or anything like that?
Yeah, I have millions of pieces, for God's sakes, at this time. I don't have them with me.
We never seen them, right? You never showed them.
What?
I've never seen them. You've never showed them.
I had a retrospective a couple of times. Once was in, I think it was 94. Was that it, Asya? Well, 94 at the Mass College of Art. And then a few years ago, I had a larger one and traveling one that I got all the paintings I wanted for it at the Concord Art Association and went to different cities around. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's it. We're still open to it, though.
Other questions? Way in the back?
I've noticed that I'm sitting where I am, I see this painting and one right behind you. And you said you like machines. And this is clearly a
Like
machine.
what?
Machines.
Machines, yeah.
And that's clearly a machine. I mean, I was trained as an architect, and I know that's a machine for a living. And there's a great similarity. But I wonder, you know, when you start to paint something like that, do you go into a different state of mind?
Gee, I wish I did. That's a good idea. No, I'm still looking for a painting. I'm looking at things, trying to organize them. I have a procedure of making a painting, so I go through the process of wondering, what is it that makes it a good idea? And it has something to do with the visual tools that are part of the whole activity of organizing, of the kind of colors, what the paint's going to do, what I expect to get out of it. You know, different kinds of things like that. But every subject is approached exactly the same.
But when you say you like machines, do you like bottles and flowers the same way?
Sure.
Or is
The same way? I don't know. Is there a sexual overtone? I don't know. Same way. I paint everything exactly the same. The subject matter. I want to paint the whole world. So I'm going to start figuring out what's going to make a good idea for a painting. And it has to do with all those tools.
including
Yes.
including something that
Yes.
space and
I mean, there was something about the delicacy of the white tone and trying to find a good color for it. You know, you can't paint everything in color and then use white and black. You have to do color. How do you find color in white? Well, I've handled that problem before. I've seen other people handle it, and I wanted to push the ideas a little bit further. And the same way with the transparency of that bottle.
yeah.
And the kind of,
transparency of the
yeah.
All right, do we have
inflated objects.
Thank you for the question. Are there other right here?
Hi, George. Do you have several paintings going at one time, or do you finish one painting and then go on?
No, I just started 3. Yeah. One is a drape that I found going through the drawers. My daughter left a lot of clothes that my wife's trying to get rid of, and it's a beautiful blue velvet dress. I brought it down there, and I remember some reflections off of a dress, I think in a Titian or something like that. I thought that'd be a great idea. So I put it down there. Then I said, I have to put something else with that. So we had a little bunny, a Jack and a Rabbit bunny. I put that next to it. And that wasn't enough, so I put a lemon in it too, on the table. So I had my still life. And that's in the sunlight, on a table. Now that's another procedure that I've been doing that nobody's. See, I like to paint things that are hard. Well, when you're painting from observation and the light's changing, not only is it hard, it's not possible. So I really like it. And I go back for a whole month. I usually stop, I like to start it about a month before the longest day of the year, so I have 2 months before and after. The light's about the same. But that's not it. I change things in different parts at different times, and nobody knows what I'm doing anyway, so I can paint it because I'm looking at it. What was the question?
Do you have several going at
Yeah,
once?
and the other one is a landscape that I looked at there near the garage there. They have a little river and then some mountain. Anyway, there's a landscape there. Foliage is all down. A few trees have the little golden things in it, but I thought it would be nice in the sun, those large tones. I haven't gotten them ever, and I would like to try that one. Then I went back, and there were some reflections on our refrigerator and streaky things, and I said, you know, I've been looking at that for 10 years. I'm going to paint them now. So then I got 3 paintings going. I'm making a mess in the kitchen now. But I have several going. Wait a minute. Always in the middle, I can always throw in a self-portrait because I do them all the time.
Right in front here.
I was just going to say thank you for being such an inspiration to all of us who paint. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is how do you keep up the discipline? You know, when you're not feeling well, or when it's, or is it just an automatic?
You know what painting's like? It's like mainlining it.
Yeah. Okay.
If you really get into it, I don't think of anything. Anything can be going on. I don't care. I'm thinking about what I'm trying to do. It takes a lot of focus. It takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And I don't feel good if I don't paint that day. You know? So I paint every day. But I don't think discipline, my daughter says that too, but I don't think there's discipline involved. I'm trying to survive.
Yeah.
You know, that's all. It's easy.
I think there was one more question in the back. Sure.
Yeah, I'm just thinking,
Hey, Mel.
I love this show. I can't believe it. He's 88, I think. He's getting better and better. So we're old. But I just want to ask you one question. You were talking a lot about Rembrandt, but you've always said that you are a fan of Kokoschka's, the Austrian painter. And I've been looking around and I see some indication of it. I find you actually a much more solid painter than Kokoschka. I mean, I like Kokoschka very much, but did you talk about the influence of Kokoschka on you?
Kokoschka?
Yeah.
Oh, there were like 2, when I left Dickinson, there were like 2 choices, Mel. There were 2 choices that I used for a guide. I said, well, there were 3 choices. There was Kokoschka and Rembrandt and me. So what is the mix of that? Well, I didn't know me at all, and I knew Kokoschka and Rembrandt much better. So I thought that, and that had to do with Dickinson too, you know. So that if I could merge those ideas, I would end up doing what is called self-expression. But those were terms I used. That I find my own painting even using what the whole world uses and what everybody sees and all this kinds of stuff. Is that enough?
Yeah, you did it.
All right, I think we have time for, well, this is the last, nobody's giving me cues, so we could go all night. Hi.
Jared, ask the audience how many people have had George as a teacher or mentor?
That's a great question. How many here have had George? Wow. Somebody needs to take a picture of this. Well, again, thank you all for coming. It's such a pleasure and a true privilege to be with you. Thank you so much.